From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
Look, Donald Trump has filed over 100 pages of financial disclosure, which is what the law requires.
But he said he would release his tax returns.
The American people can review that, and he's going, Senator,
all right,
he's going to release his tax returns when the audit
Social Security
is over.
Richard Nixon released tax returns when he was under audit.
They're going to raise your tax.
If you can't meet the Nixon standard,
the people at home cannot understand either one of you when you speak over each other. I would please ask you to wait until it is that the other is finished.
All right,
in the only vice presidential debate of the 2016 race, Democrat Tim Kaine squared off with Republican Mike Pence at Longwood University in Virginia. We'll air highlights from our Expanding the Debate special, in which we gave Green Party vice presidential candidate Ajamu Baraka a chance to respond in real time, live during the debate, to the same questions posed to Kaine and Pence.
Look, on the issue of taxes, I'm more concerned about the fact that we have a number of corporations, multinational corporations based in the U.S. that historically don't pay any taxes. So we have an issue with rich individuals who are able to avoid taxes, but we also have these multinational corporations based in the U.S. That are avoiding taxes to the tune of $717 billion.
All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. At least 11 people are feared dead in the Caribbean after the massive Category 4 Hurricane Matthew slammed into Haiti and the Dominican Republic Tuesday with winds up to 145 miles an hour and torrential downpours. It's the strongest storm to hit the Caribbean in nearly a decade. In Haiti, Matthew's killed at least 4 people and displaced thousands more across a country still recovering from the devastating 2010 Haitian earthquake. The storm also knocked out most communications across Haiti and flooded a major bridge connecting southern Haiti to the rest of the country. The United Nations has warned the hurricane poses the greatest humanitarian threat to Haiti since the earthquake 6 years ago. The hurricane also hit the Bahamas and Cuba, where the U.S. military evacuated 700 employees and some family pets from the naval base at Guantanamo, although it did not evacuate the 61 prisoners held there. The storm is now hurtling toward the U.S. coast. In anticipation, multiple governors have declared states of emergency, and South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley has ordered the evacuation of coastal regions inhabited by more than 1 million people. Meanwhile, in South Korea, Typhoon Chaba has killed at least 5 people after it made landfall Wednesday, flooding out South Korea's main port and major cities. The typhoon is now hurtling toward Japan. Scientists have linked the increasing intensity of hurricanes and typhoons to climate change. In election news, vice presidential candidates Virginia Senator Tim Kaine and Indiana Governor Mike Pence squared off Tuesday night in the only vice presidential debate. It was held at Longwood University in Farmville, Virginia, and moderated by Elaine Quijano of CBS News. The debate was tense, with Kaine frequently attacking Pence over the proposals and character of his running mate, Donald Trump.
I'll just say this. We trust Hillary Clinton, my wife and I, and we trust her with the most important thing in our life. We have a son deployed overseas in the Marine Corps right now. We trust Hillary Clinton as president and commander-in-chief, but the thought of Donald Trump as commander-in-chief scares us to death.
Governor Pence, meanwhile, defended Donald Trump's refusal to release his tax returns amidst new revelations that suggest Trump could have avoided paying taxes for up to 18 years. This clip begins with Senator Kaine.
But why won't he release his tax return?
Well, we're answering the question about the business thing.
I do want to come back on this.
His tax returns, that showed he went through a very difficult time, but he used the tax code just the way it's supposed to be used, and he did it brilliantly.
How do you know that? You haven't seen his tax return.
Third-party vice presidential nominees were excluded from the debate, but on Tuesday night, Democracy Now! Expanded the debate in real-time live. After every question answered by the major party vice presidential candidates Mike Pence and Tim Kaine, we paused to get response from Green Party vice presidential nominee Ajamu Baraka. We'll broadcast a part of this expanded debate after headlines. In more campaign news, a fight broke out at a Donald Trump campaign rally in Prescott, Arizona, between a Trump supporter and protester Tuesday. There have been episodes of violence at Trump rallies throughout the campaign, which have linked to Trump's rhetoric. In March, 3 anti-Trump protesters sued Donald Trump, arguing he incited a riot at a rally in Louisville, Kentucky, causing them to be attacked by his supporters after he repeatedly called on the crowd to, quote, get them out, unquote. In Indiana, state police have raided Indiana's largest voter registration office. The Intercept reports nearly a dozen police officers searched the Indianapolis offices of the Indiana Voter Registration Project, seizing multiple computers and workers' personal cell phones. The police say the search is related to an ongoing investigation into possible voter registration fraud, but organizers say the operation was an attack on voter registration efforts in the Republican-controlled state. Former President Bill Clinton is trying to walk back his comments Monday in which he called Obamacare the craziest thing in the world while campaigning for Hillary Clinton in Flint, Michigan.
The people that are getting killed in this deal are small business people and individuals who make just a little too much to get any of these subsidies. Why? Because they're not organized, they don't have any bargaining power with insurance companies, and they're getting whacked. So you've got this crazy system where all of a sudden 25 million more people have health care, and then the people are out there busting it sometimes 60 hours a week, wind up with their premiums doubled and their coverage cut in half. It's the craziest thing in the world.
On Tuesday, Bill Clinton attempted to walk back his comments by saying Obama's signature legislation did a world of good. Former employees of the email giant Yahoo say Yahoo secretly scanned the contents of hundreds of millions of email accounts and turned the information over to the NSA or FBI. In order to do so, Yahoo secretly built a special software program specifically designed to search every single user's emails for keywords provided by the U.S. government. If true, the practice represents the first known time a giant email company searched all arriving emails in real time at the behest of the U.S. government's domestic surveillance programs. This comes as newly revealed documents show how the Justice Department subpoenaed Open Whisper Systems, the maker of the popular encrypted messaging application Signal, in efforts to get a wide range of information about 2 phone numbers, and then imposed a gag order on Open Whisper Systems, preventing the company from talking about it. The encrypted application maker did not turn over the desired information because the company does not store such information about its users. The Justice Department sought the information in early 2016, but it's only coming to light now because the gag order has been lifted. In Charlotte, North Carolina, police have released the full body cam video of the fatal police shooting of African-American father Keith Lamont Scott. The 16-minute video shows Scott lying on the ground, handcuffed with multiple bullet wounds from the police shooting. The video does not show Scott with a gun, as the police have claimed he had, although officers did twice make reference to a gun during the video. North Carolina is an open carry state. This is Scott's family lawyer, Justin Bamberg.
I can tell you that it is very difficult to watch. It's difficult for a wife to watch. And what you're seeing is real life. You see Mr. Scott on the ground. You see him handcuffed. And you see a human being, a father, a husband, lose his life.
Keith Lamont Scott's killing by police has sparked massive protests in Charlotte as well as nationwide. Meanwhile, the New York Police Department's admitted not a single one of its 34,800 officers is currently wearing a body camera. On Monday, the NYPD said it picked a company to provide about 5,000 body cams to the force, but no contract has been signed. In Poland, as many as 6 million women poured into the streets for a nationwide protest Monday, opposing proposals to completely ban abortions across Poland. Already by law, Polish women are only allowed to access an abortion if the child is the result of rape or incest, or if their lives are in danger as a result of the pregnancy. But the new proposed laws would make all abortion illegal and punishable by up to 5 years in prison for the mother. Doctors could also be jailed for providing abortions. The Catholic Church in Poland is supporting the proposed ban. In Mexico, 2 students from the Ayotzinapa Rural Teachers College in the southern state of Guerrero have been killed by gunmen Tuesday. The attack came after gunmen stopped a bus traveling to the town of Tixla. At least 1 other person was killed and 3 others wounded in the attack, including an 8-year-old boy. It's not known who the gunmen were. Meanwhile, also in Mexico, a group of women who were reportedly kidnapped, tortured and raped by Mexican police officers 10 years ago have now taken their case to the Inter-American Human Rights Court. The events occurred in San Salvador Atenco in the state of Mexico. The women were kidnapped amidst 2 days of popular protests in May 2006 after police cracked down on a group of female flower sellers. The current president of Mexico, Enrique Peña Nieto, was the governor of the state of Mexico at the time. This is Barbara Mendez, a survivor of the sexual torture.
During the detention and during transportation, I was tortured physically, psychologically, and sexually. I was caught up in the penal process for more than 2.5 years. It was a very heartbreaking experience, and it has left a big impact on my life to be detained and tortured under these conditions.
And in Minnesota, thousands of nurses have voted to remain on strike into a second month as they demand a contract that includes safe staffing ratios in the hospital, improved security in emergency rooms, and the right to retain their union-backed health insurance plans. More than 4,000 nurses are currently participating in the strike, which began September 5th, exactly a month ago. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, DemocracyNow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Vice presidential candidates Republican Mike Pence and Democrat Tim Kaine faced off in Longwood University in Farmville, Virginia, Tuesday night in the first and only debate before next month's election, the first and only vice presidential debate. Pence is the governor of Indiana and a former congressman. Tim Kaine is the junior senator from Virginia and Virginia's former governor. Third-party vice presidential candidates, including Libertarian William Weld and the Green Party's Ajamu Baraka, were excluded from the debate stage under stringent rules set by the Commission on Presidential Debates, which is controlled by the Democratic and Republican parties. Well, on Tuesday night, Democracy Now! Aired a special expanding the debate broadcast, where we gave major third-party candidates a chance to respond to the same questions in real time as the major candidates. The Green Party's Ajamu Baraka joined us live from Richmond, Virginia. Libertarian vice presidential candidate William Weld did not respond to our invitation. Ajamu Baraka is a longtime human rights activist, founding executive director of the U.S. Human Rights Network, and coordinator of the U.S.-backed Black Left Unity Network's Committee on International Affairs. Today, we air highlights from our Expanding the Debate special. We begin with moderator Elaine Quijano of CBS News.
Senator Kaine, on the campaign trail, you praised Secretary Clinton's character, including her commitment to public service. Yet 60% of voters don't think she's trustworthy. Why do so many people distrust her? Is it because they have questions about her emails and the Clinton Foundation?
Elaine, let me tell you why I trust Hillary Clinton. Here's what people should look at as they look at a public servant. Do they have a passion in their life that showed up before they were in public life, and have they held on to that passion throughout their life, regardless of whether they were in office or not, succeeding or failing? Hillary Clinton has that passion. From a time as a kid in a Methodist youth group in the suburbs of Chicago, she has been focused on serving others with a special focus on empowering families and kids. As a civil rights lawyer in the South with the Children's Defense Fund, First Lady of Arkansas and this country's Senator, Secretary of State, it's always been about putting others first. And that's a sharp contrast with Donald Trump. Donald Trump always puts himself first. He built a business career, in the words of one of his own campaign staffers off the backs of the little guy. And as a candidate, he started his campaign with a speech where he called Mexicans rapists and criminals, and he has pursued the discredited and really outrageous lie that President Obama wasn't born in the United States. It is so painful to suggest that we go back to think about these days where an African American could not be a citizen of the United States. And I can't imagine how Governor Pence can defend the insult-driven, selfish, me-first style of Donald Trump.
Governor Pence, let me ask you, you have said Donald Trump is, quote, thoughtful, compassionate, and steady. Yet 67% of voters feel he is a risky choice, and 65% feel he does not have the right kind of temperament to be president. Why do so many Americans think Mr. Trump is simply too erratic?
Well, let me say first and foremost that Senator, you and Hillary Clinton would know a lot about an insult-driven campaign. It really is remarkable. At a time when literally, in the wake of Hillary Clinton's tenure as Secretary of State, where she was the architect of the Obama administration's foreign policy, we see entire portions of the world, particularly the wider Middle East, literally spinning out of control. I mean, the situation we're watching hour by hour in Syria today is a result of the failed foreign policy and the weak foreign policy that Hillary Clinton helped lead in this administration and create. The newly emboldened the aggression of Russia, whether it was in Ukraine or now their heavy-handed approach. Their heavy-handed approach.
You both have said Vladimir Putin is a better
we're going to get to Russia in just a moment, but I do want to get back to the question.
Elaine, thank you, Senator.
These guys have praised Vladimir Putin as a great leader. How can they defend
Senator? We do have that coming up here, but in the meantime, the questions were about your running mates.
I must have hit a nerve here.
Why the disconnect?
At a time of great challenge in the life of this nation, where we've weakened America's place in the world, stifled America's economy, the campaign of Hillary Clinton and Tim Kaine has been an avalanche of insults. Look, to get to your question about trustworthiness, Donald Trump has built a business through hard times and through good times. He's brought an extraordinary business acumen. He's employed tens of thousands of people in this country.
And paid a few taxes and lost $1 billion a year.
But why the disconnect with your running mates?
But there's a reason why people question the trustworthiness of Hillary Clinton, and that's because they're paying attention. I mean, the reality is when she was Secretary of State, Senator, come on. She had a Clinton Foundation accepting contributions from foreign governments.
You are Donald Trump's apprentice. Let me talk about this
Senator,
issue
I think I'm still on my time.
Well, I think, isn't this a discussion?
This is our open discussion.
Let's talk about the state of the world.
Let me interrupt you and finish my sentence if I can. The Clinton Foundation accepted foreign contributions from foreign governments and foreign donors while she was Secretary of State.
Okay, now I can weigh in.
She had a private server.
I get to weigh in.
That was discovered
which I did raise. Senator,
to keep that pay-to-play process
you have an opportunity
out of the reach of the
Governor
public.
Pence doesn't think the world's going so well, and he, is going to say it's everybody's fault.
Do you?
Let me tell you this: when Hillary Clinton became Secretary of State, Governor Pence, do you know that Osama bin Laden was alive?
Yes.
Do you know that we had 175,000 troops deployed in the battlefield in Iraq and Afghanistan? Do you know that Iran was racing toward a nuclear weapon and Russia was expanding its stockpile? Under Secretary Clinton's leadership, she was part of the national team, public safety team, that went after and revived the dormant hunt against bin Laden and wiped him off the face of the earth. She worked to deal with the Russians to reduce their chemical weapons stockpile. She worked a tough negotiation with nations around the world to eliminate the Iranian nuclear weapons program without firing a shot.
Eliminate the Iranian nuclear weapons
Absolutely,
program.
without firing a shot. And instead of 175,000 American troops deployed overseas, we now have 15,000.
Right, and
these are very, very.
And Iraq has been overrun by ISIS because Hillary Clinton failed to renegotiate.
More American troops
Hillary
in Iraq,
Hillary Clinton failed to renegotiate a status of forces agreement.
Green Party Vice Presidential nominee Jamu Baraka into this discussion. If you can respond to Governor Pence and Senator Kaine.
Well, I think that we are seeing a dramatic example of why the people of this country dislike and distrust both of these major candidates and their vice presidential running mates. We have this silly bickering as opposed to getting to the real issues to debate for the American people. There's a reason why they are both distrusted, because I think that the American people understand that both represent the politics of the establishment, the status quo, that the American people are very distrustful of. They see that, in fact, the Middle East has spun out of control. We see that Hillary Clinton led the attacks on a number of countries, including Libya. Led the justification for destabilizing Syria. They see that Donald Trump has his bombastic rhetoric regarding carpet bombing in the Middle East and attacking this nation and that nation, and they are sick of it. Many people in this country are prepared to support a peace candidate, and the only peace candidate, the only peace ticket in this race is, in fact, the Green Party. So this kind of bickering and this kinds of personal attacks, as opposed to having a serious conversation about the critical issues that face this country, issues of war and peace, is a perfect example of why more and more people are looking beyond these two parties and looking for a real alternative. And the only alternative we have right now is, in fact, the Green Party and the Stein-Baraka ticket.
Green Party vice presidential candidate Ajamu Baraka joining in Democracy Now's Expanding the Debate special as we bring you more highlights in a minute.
Yeah, election time's coming. Who you gonna vote for? Yeah, if I was president, I'd get elected on Friday, assassinated on Saturday, buried on Sunday, they go back to work on Monday. If I was president, if I was president, if I was president, yeah. Instead of spending billions on the war, I can use that money so I can feed the poor, 'cause I know some so poor. When it rains, that's when they shower, scream and fight the power. That's when the vulture devours. If I was president, I get elected on Friday, assassinated on Saturday, buried on Sunday, they go back to work on Monday. If I was president, if I was president, if I was president, yeah. I know some soldiers.
If I Was President by Wycliffe Jean. His home country, Haiti, is being ravaged by Hurricane Matthew. The issue of climate change was not raised in one question during last night's sole vice presidential debate of the 2016 election. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman as we return to our Expanding the Debate special. On Tuesday night, vice presidential candidates Republican Governor Mike Pence and Democratic Senator Tim Kaine faced off at Longwood University in Farmville, Virginia, for their first and only debate before next month's election. Democracy Now! Aired a special Expanding the Debate broadcast Tuesday, where we gave major third-party candidates a chance to respond in real time to the same questions put to the major candidates. The Green Party's Ajamu Baraka joined us live from Richmond, Virginia. Today, we're airing highlights from that Expanding the Debate special. This is moderator Elaine Quijano of CBS News.
The New York Times released part of Mr. Trump's 1995 tax return and reported that he could have avoided paying federal income taxes for years. Yesterday, Mr. Trump said he brilliantly used the laws to pay as little tax as legally possible. Does that seem fair to you?
This is probably the difference between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton and Senator Kaine. I mean, Hillary Clinton and Senator Kaine, and God bless you for it, career public servants, that's great. Donald Trump is a businessman, not a career politician. He actually built a business. Those tax returns that came out publicly this week showed that he faced some pretty tough times 20 years ago. But like virtually every other business, including the New York Times not too long ago, he used what's called net operating loss. We have a tax code, Senator, that actually is designed to encourage entrepreneurship.
But why won't he release his tax return?
Well, we're answering the question about the business thing.
I do want to come back on this.
His tax returns that showed he went through a very difficult time but he used the tax code just the way it's supposed to be used, and he did it brilliantly.
How do you know that?
You haven't
seen his tax
runway because he's created a business that's worth billions of dollars today.
How do you know that?
And with regard to paying taxes, this whole riff about not paying taxes and people saying he didn't pay taxes for years, Donald Trump has created tens of thousands of jobs, and he's paid payroll taxes, sales taxes,
Senator, I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to respond, and I have a question on Social Security.
Hillary Clinton is going to raise taxes, and Donald Trump and I are going to cut them.
Donald Trump started this campaign in 2014. He said, if I run for president, I will absolutely release my taxes. He's broken his first promise. Second, he stood on the stage last week, and when Hillary said you haven't been paying taxes, he said, that makes me smart. So it's smart not to pay for our military. It's smart not to pay for veterans. It's smart not to pay for teachers. And I guess all of us who do pay for those things, I guess we're stupid. And the last thing I'll say
Senator,
is this.
do you take all the deductions that you're entitled to?
The last thing I want to ask Governor Pence is
I do.
this. Governor Pence had to give Donald Trump his tax returns to show he was qualified to be vice president. Donald Trump must give the American public his tax returns to show that he's qualified to be president, and he's breaking his promise.
Elaine, I have to respond to this.
You get very little time.
I'll be very respectful.
Governor.
Look, Donald Trump has filed over 100 pages of financial disclosure, which is what the law requires.
But he said he would release his tax returns. The American people can review that, and he's going, Senator,
all right,
he's going to release his tax returns when the audit
Social Security.
is over.
Richard Nixon released tax returns when he was under audit.
They're going to raise your taxes.
If you can't meet the Nixon standard,
the people at home cannot understand either one of you when you speak over each other. I would please ask you to wait until it is that the other is finished.
I want to go back to Green Party's Ajamu Baraka. His response to the question about the New York Times releasing part of Donald Trump's 1995 tax returns that showed he could have avoided paying taxes for 18 years.
Look, on the issue of taxes, I'm more concerned about the fact that we have a number of corporations, multinational corporations based in the U.S. that historically don't pay any taxes. So we have an issue with individuals, rich individuals who are able to avoid taxes, but we also have these multinational corporations based in the U.S. That are avoiding taxes to the tune of $17 billion. You know, there's a different code for the rich and one for the rest of us. And what we have to do is to eliminate that contradiction. So the real issue is not just the fact that Donald Trump took advantage of the tax laws. The real issue is that those tax laws exist. So we're going to have a fair economy. We're going to have fairness in this economy. We have to eliminate those kinds of loopholes, and we are prepared to, in fact, do that. It's a shame that we have corporations that make billions of dollars, but yet are able to avoid paying any tax here in this country.
This is moderator Elaine Quijano of CBS News.
All right, I'd like to turn to our next segment now, and in this I'd like to focus on social issues. You have both been open about the role that faith has played in your lives. Can you discuss in detail a time when you struggled to balance your personal faith and a public policy position? Senator King.
Yeah, that's an easy one for me, Elaine. It's an easy one. I'm really fortunate. I grew up in a wonderful household with great Irish Catholic parents. My mom and dad are sitting right here. I was educated by Jesuits at Rockhurst High School in Kansas City, my 40th reunions in 10 days. And I worked with Jesuit missionaries in Honduras now nearly 35 years ago, and they were the heroes of my life. I try to practice my religion in a very devout way and follow the teachings of my church in my own personal life. But I don't believe in this nation, a First Amendment nation, where we don't raise any religion over the other and we allow people to worship as they please, that the doctrines of any one religion should be mandated for everyone. For me, the hardest struggle in my faith life was the Catholic Church is against the death penalty, and so am I. But I was governor of a state, and the state law said that there was a death penalty for crimes if the jury determined them to be heinous. And so I had to grapple with that. When I was running for governor, I was attacked pretty strongly because of my position on the death penalty. But I looked the voters of Virginia in the eye and said, look, this is my religion. I'm not going to change my religious practice to get one vote, but I know how to take an oath and uphold the law. And if you elect me, I will uphold the law. And I was elected, and I did. It was very, very difficult to allow executions to go forward, but in circumstances where I didn't feel like there was a case for clemency, I told Virginia voters I would uphold the law, and I did. That was a real struggle. But I think it is really, really important that those of us who have deep faith lives don't feel like we can just substitute our own views for everybody else in society, regardless of their views.
Governor Pence.
Well, it's a wonderful question. And my Christian faith is at the very heart of who I am. I was also raised in a wonderful family of faith. It was church on Sunday morning and grace before dinner. But my Christian faith became real for me when I made a personal decision for Christ when I was a freshman in college. And I've tried to live that out, however imperfectly, every day of my life since. And with my wife at my side, we followed a calling into public service where we've tried to keep faith with the values that we cherish. And with regard to when I struggle, I appreciate and I have a great deal of respect for Senator Kane's sincere faith. I truly do.
That's shared.
But for me, I would tell you that for me, the sanctity of life proceeds out of the belief that ancient principle that where God says, before you were formed in the womb, I knew you. And so for my first time in public life, I've sought to stand with great compassion for the sanctity of life. The state of Indiana has also sought to make sure that we expand alternatives in healthcare counseling for women, non-abortion alternatives. I'm also very pleased the fact we're well on our way in Indiana to becoming the most pro-adoption state in America. I think if you're going to be pro-life, you should be pro-adoption. But what I can't understand is with Hillary Clinton and now Senator Kane at her side is to support a practice like partial birth abortion. I mean, to hold to the view, and I know, Senator Kane, you hold pro-life views personally, but the very idea that a child that is almost born into the world could still have their life taken from them is just anathema to me. And I can't conscience about a party that supports that, or that I know you've historically opposed taxpayer funding of abortion, but Hillary Clinton wants to repeal the long-standing provision in the law where we said we wouldn't use taxpayer dollars to fund abortion. So for me, my faith informs my life. I try and spend a little time on my knees every day, but it all for me begins with cherishing the dignity, the worth, the value of every human life.
Elaine, this is a fundamental question, a fundamental question. Hillary and I are both people out of religious backgrounds. Her Methodist church experience was really formative for her as a public servant. But we really feel like you should live fully and with enthusiasm the commands of your faith. But it is not the role of the public servant to mandate that for everybody else. So let's talk about abortion and choice. Let's talk about that. We support Roe versus Wade. We support the constitutional right of American women to consult their own conscience, their own supportive partner, their own minister, but then make their own decision about pregnancy. That's something we trust American women to do that. And we don't think that women should be punished, as Donald Trump said they should, for making the decision to have an abortion. Governor Pence wants to repeal Roe versus Wade. He said he wants to put it on the ash heap of history. And we have some young people in the audience who weren't even born when Roe was a pregnancy. I think you should live your moral values. But the last thing, the very last thing that government should do is have laws that would punish women who make reproductive choices. And that is the fundamental difference between a Clinton-Kane ticket and a Trump-Pence ticket that wants to punish women who make that choice.
It's really not. Donald Trump and I would never support legislation that punished women who made the heartbreaking choice to end a pregnancy.
And why did Donald Trump say that?
We just never would.
Why did he say that?
Well, look, he's not a polished politician like you and Hillary Clinton. And so,
well, I would admit
don't always
that's not
come out exactly the way he means them, but I'm telling you what other policy of administration would be.
Great line from the Gospel of Matthew. From the fullness of the heart, the mouth speaks.
Yeah.
When Donald Trump says women should be punished, or Mexicans are rapists and criminals, or John McCain's not a hero, he is showing you who he is.
Senator, you whipped out that Mexican thing again. Look.
Can you defend it?
There are criminal aliens in this country, Tim, who have come into this country illegally, who are perpetrating violence and taking American lives.
You want to use a big tar brush against Mexicans?
He also said, and many of them are good people. You keep leaving that out of your quote. And if you want me to go there, I'll go there. But there is a choice here, and it is a choice on life. I couldn't be more proud to be standing with Donald Trump, who's standing for the right to life. It's a principle that, Senator Kaine, and I'm very gentle about this because I really do respect you, it's a principle that you embrace. And I've appreciated the fact that you've supported the Hyde Amendment, which bans the use of taxpayer funding for abortion in the past, but that's not Hillary Clinton's view. People need to understand we can come together as a nation. We can create a culture of life. More and more young people today are embracing life because we know we are... We're better for it. We can, like Mother Teresa said at that famous National Prayer Breakfast.
This is important.
Let's welcome the children into our world. There are so many families around the country who can't have children. We could improve adoption so that families that can't have children can adopt more readily.
Why don't you trust women to make this choice for themselves? We can encourage people to support life. Of course we can, but why don't you trust women? Why doesn't Donald Trump trust women to make this choice for themselves? That's what we ought to be doing in public life, living our lives of faith or motivation with enthusiasm and excitement, convincing each other, dialoguing with each other about important moral issues of the day. But on fundamental issues of morality, we should let women make their own decisions.
A society can be judged by how it deals with its most vulnerable, the aged, the infirm, the disabled, and the unborn. I believe it with all my heart, and I couldn't be more proud to be standing with a pro-life candidate in Donald Trump.
Mike Pence and Tim Kaine, Jamu Baraka, Green Party nominee for vice president.
Well, I have to say that while I'm not a person of faith necessarily in terms of the organized religious view, I do operate from an ethical framework informed by my lived experiences, but informed by my understanding of the kinds of values that we must have in order to be fully formed human beings and to live in harmony with each other and with nature. And so I believe in the value of cooperation. I believe in the possibility of peace. I believe that human beings can be more than what they are today. But I also believe very passionately that we cannot have a situation in this country where women are criminalized for exercising their self-determination over their bodies, that women have a fundamental right to autonomy and self-determination over themselves, their sex lives, and everything else. And it's sort of absurd for me to see these two white males engage in this kind of conversation. Well, to a certain extent, I guess we have to agree, though, with Tim Kaine than the right-wing patriarchy of Mike Pence. I believe that he represents a position that is quite troubling, one that we have to reject as a society evolving in a direction in which we are going to represent and support and recognize the equal rights of everyone in this society. It's also quite surreal to me that both talk about the sanctity of life, just 20 minutes from talking about militarism and going to war. I guess that's one reason why some of us find ourselves unable to completely understand the morality of some of these individuals who call themselves people of faith. It's a clear contradiction to me. Tim Kaine, who says he believes in life, felt that he was compelled to sign off on those death sentences in Maryland and Virginia. That's not true. He had the ability to commute those death penalty cases to life in prison. He made a political choice, and as a consequence, someone's life was taken. So, you know, these kinds of ethical contradictions are the kinds of contradictions that we find reflected also in the contradictory policies of both of these candidates.
Green Party's Ajamu Baraka joining in Democracy Now's Expanding the Debate special with the two major party candidates that took place in Virginia last night. This is Democracy Now! We'll continue our Expanding the Debate special in a moment. Paranoid by Black Sabbath here on Democracy Now!, DemocracyNow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman as we return to our Expanding the Debate special. On Tuesday night, vice presidential candidates, Republican Governor Mike Pence, Democratic Senator Tim Kaine, faced off at Longwood University in Farmville, Virginia, in their first and only debate before next month's election. On Tuesday night, Democracy Now! Gave major third-party candidates a chance to respond to the same questions in real-time live as the major candidates. The Green Party's Ajamu Baraka joined us live from Richmond, Virginia. Today we're airing highlights from our Expanding the Debate special. We go back to moderator Elaine Quijano of CBS News.
Senator Kaine, Governor Pence, please.
Syria.
I want to turn now to Syria. 250,000 people, 100,000 of them children, are under siege in Aleppo, Syria. Bunker-buster bombs, cluster munitions, and incendiary weapons are being dropped on them by Russian and Syrian militaries. Does the U.S. have a responsibility to protect civilians and prevent mass casualties on this scale? Governor Pence.
The United States of America needs to begin to exercise strong leadership to protect the vulnerable citizens and over 100,000 children in Aleppo. Hillary Clinton's top priority when she became Secretary of State was the Russian reset. The Russian reset. After the Russian reset, the Russians invaded Ukraine and took over Crimea. And the small and bullying leader of Russia is now dictating terms to the United States to the point where all the United States of America, the greatest nation on earth, just withdraws from talks about a ceasefire while Vladimir Putin puts a missile defense system in Syria while he marshals the forces and begins. Look, we have got to begin to lean into this with strong, broad-shouldered American leadership. It begins by rebuilding our military. I mean, the Russians and the Chinese have been making enormous investments in the military. We have the smallest Navy since 1916. We have the lowest number of troops since the end of the Second World War. We've got to work with the Congress and Donald Trump will to rebuild our military and project American strength in the world. But about Aleppo and about Syria, I truly do believe that what America ought to do right now is to immediately establish safe zones so that families and vulnerable families with children can move out of those areas, work with our Arab partners real time right now to make that happen. And secondly, I just have to tell you that the provocations by Russia need to be met with American strength. And if Russia chooses to be involved and continue, I should say, to be involved in this barbaric attack on civilians in Aleppo, the United States of America should be prepared to use military force to strike military targets of the Assad regime, to prevent them from this humanitarian crisis that is taking place in Aleppo. There's a broad range of other things that we ought to do as well. We ought to deploy a missile defense shield to the Czech Republic and Poland. which Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama pulled back on out of not wanting to offend the Russians back in 2009. We've just got to have American strength on the world stage. And when Donald Trump becomes president of the United States, the Russians and other countries in the world will know they're dealing with a strong American president.
Senator Hillary and I also agree that the establishment of a humanitarian zone in northern Syria with the provision of international human aid consistent with the UN Security Council resolution that was passed in February 2014 would be a very, very good idea. And Hillary also has the ability to stand up to Russia in a way that this ticket does not. Donald Trump again and again has praised Vladimir Putin, and it's clear that he has business dealings with Russian oligarchs who are very connected to Putin. The Trump campaign management team had to be fired a month or so ago because of those shadowy connections with pro-Putin forces. Governor Pence made the odd claim. He said, inarguably, Vladimir Putin is a better leader than President Obama. Vladimir Putin's run his economy into the ground. He persecutes LGBT folks and journalists. If you don't know the difference between dictatorship and leadership, then you got to go back to a 5th grade civics class. I tell you what offends me. Governor Pence just said that Donald Trump will rebuild the military. No, he won't. Donald Trump is avoiding paying taxes. The New York Times story, and we need to get this, but the New York Times story suggested that he probably didn't pay taxes for about 18 years starting in 1995. Those years included the years of 9/11. So get this. On 9/11, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump's hometown was attacked by the worst terrorist attack in the history of the United States. Young men and women signed up to serve in the military to fight terrorism. Hillary Clinton went to Washington to get funds to rebuild her city and protect first responders. But Donald Trump was fighting a very different fight. It was a fight to avoid paying taxes so that he wouldn't support the fight against terror. He wouldn't support troops. He wouldn't support. This is important, Elaine. When a guy running for president will not support the troops, not support veterans, not support teachers, that's really important. And I said about Aleppo, we do agree. The notion is we have to create a humanitarian zone in northern Syria. It's very important.
John Mubaraka, vice presidential nominee for the Green Party, your response.
This is a very dangerous conversation. What we are seeing from both candidates, both parties, is a commitment to go to war. You know, it's very disheartening to see the kind of images coming from the conflict in Syria. But that conflict had a genesis. It didn't just emerge out of thin air. And not to get into the details of how this conflict evolved, I think it's important, though, to say that, you know, the U.S., their hands are not clean. This notion that the U.S. was standing on the side and not involved, that narrative is a false narrative. And this idea that the collapse of the last ceasefire can be put at the foot of the Russians is, in fact, an outright lie. Now, that may be painful for folks who are not following the situation very closely, but it is, in fact, a fact that basically the Pentagon undermined the agreement, the ceasefire agreement that was negotiated by John Kerry when they attacked the Syrian army and killed 62 of their soldiers. When they attacked a known site, that was the effective collapse of that ceasefire. So going into Syria and establishing a humanitarian zone, we're talking about an act of war. Where is the legitimacy for that? The U.S. has no legitimacy to be operating in that territory. And this plan on both the Democrat side and the Republican side to take the U.S. back into a war, because when you're talking about intervention, you're talking about boots on the ground, another war, the American people are tired of this. And I don't think they're going to go for the justification for intervention again into this conflict. What we would do with the Stein-Baraka administration is to use the power of this state to engage in a real peace process, to use the power of this state to have real national reconciliation in Syria, to de-escalate the issues, de-escalate the conflict in Syria and across the Middle East. So we're not going to stand by and allow for this kind of war propaganda to be whipped up by both of these candidates and by the corporate media.
Green Party Vice Presidential candidate Jamu Baraka is part of our Expanding the Debate special, when we gave him a chance to respond to the same questions posed to Democrat Tim Kaine and Republican Mike Pence in real time. After the debate, I spoke to prize-winning investigative journalist Alan Nairn for his response.
On the one hand, the debate didn't really convey the gravity of the threat of Trump. The fact that an all-but-open white supremacist and proto-fascist has a chance to take over the U.S. executive branch and free up the Paul Ryan agenda in Congress and an ultra-right agenda from the Supreme Court. That didn't fully come through. However, I think there were some very important factual points that came out of it. One was that I think Pence succeeded in exploding the idea that some people have that a Trump presidency would somehow be less lethal than a Democratic presidency. I mean, to begin with, both parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, are lawless. They're willing to violate the domestic murder laws of every country in the world. They're willing to violate international law. They're willing to violate aggression, to commit aggression. They're willing to continue the U.S. policy of trying to run the world. And it's the case that whoever gets elected, U.S. behavior overseas is likely to be even worse than it is now, in that Clinton is even somewhat more aggressive than Obama has been. But there's been this notion around that Trump would somehow pull back from that. Pence made it clear, absolutely not. Trump has already, in essence, promised a new war with Iran. When he won, promises to avoid the Iran nuclear deal. 2, says he'll sink Iranian ships if they taunt American sailors. Now, in this debate, Pence essentially promised a military confrontation with Russia. Trump has gotten some credit from some by talking about how bad NATO is, which is justified, and by implying he would somehow be less aggressive in the Middle East. Well, Pence exploded both of those. Pence said he wants to put missile defense systems in Poland and the Czech Republic, which is precisely the #1 priority of Russia to stop, which Russia has said repeatedly, if you do that, it leads to military confrontation with us. And then secondly, Pence openly called for U.S. attacks on the Syrian army, which would be an even hotter military confrontation with Russia. There's the added dimension, which they didn't talk about tonight, but which becomes even more menacing when you put it in this context, of the Trump policy of a return to the old U.S. policy of conquest for resources, like what the U.S. did with Iran in '53 with the coup to secure the oil for the Western interests, what they did with Guatemala in '54, called in by the United Fruit Company to put the military in power and begin a mass slaughter there. Trump says, go in and take the oil. Well, that has implications for many countries, especially for Venezuela. The next president is going to face clear, inevitable confrontations with North Korea over nuclear weapons and with Venezuela, where the government is on the verge of collapse. Venezuela has the world's #1 oil reserves, even greater than those of Iran, Iraq, Libya, and Saudi Arabia. With a Trump principle of take the oil, the outlook is even more ominous for a place like Venezuela than it would be under a Clinton administration. On other issues, too, I think there were very significant statements. Pence attacked Kaine for implying that there was an element of racism in the massive police killings of African Americans, essentially saying, that's outrageous. How can you say there's any racism involved? Well, if you follow the logic of that, that means that in a situation where you have massively disproportionate police shootings of African Americans, and you then say, as Pence was saying, that there's no racism involved, that means you're saying that those African Americans essentially deserved it, since so many more African Americans are shot in that manner than whites. On Social Security, I think the remarks of both were very significant. Kaine merely said we have to protect Social Security. Pence merely said we have to meet the obligations. Now, those are both code phrases which have been used by those who are trying to cut Social Security in the name of cutting the deficit. Kaine correctly pointed out that Pence has been a leader in the Paul Ryan movement to completely destroy Social Security, to privatize it, and nothing Pence said backed away from that. And Kaine didn't even commit to preserving Social Security as it is and not cutting benefits, which Clinton has already done. So he actually took a step back on the issue.
Investigative journalist Alan Nairn. During our Expanding the Debate special on Tuesday, Democracy Now!'s Nermeen Sheikh and I also spoke to Columbia University law professor Catherine Franke, who directs the Center for Gender and Sexuality Law. She spoke about Governor Mike Pence and his record on reproductive rights and Planned Parenthood.
As governor, he cut all of the funding to Planned Parenthood in the state of Indiana, and it resulted in the closing of all of their clinics. What resulted from that? Since these clinics did reproductive rights work, certainly, and family planning work, certainly, but they also did HIV testing and counseling. And as a result of the closing of the Planned Parenthood clinics, the HIV rate, infection rate, skyrocketed in Indiana. And this was all over the news. And so the anti-abortion crusade has a ripple effect much farther out beyond just the issue of abortion itself.
And Catherine Franke, can you say a little about Tim Kaine, and in particular his Catholicism in the context of the positions he's taken both on abortion and the death penalty?
Yeah, it's such an interesting question. Both of these vice presidential candidates profess sincerely to be devout Christians. Mike Pence, evangelical Protestant, and Tim Kaine, a Catholic.
I mean, Mike Pence famously said, I am a Christian, I'm a conservative, and I'm a Republican, in that order. In
that order, that's right. And what I think we're seeing in these two candidates are two faces of Christianity in this country. One with Mike Pence, where Christianity is really being weaponized as a way to justify a range of discrimination, small-minded, mean, xenophobic thinking. And in the case of Tim Kaine, a different kind of Christianity, what I would call a more Catholic way, with a little c, of thinking faith and thinking a brotherly love, if you will, a Christianity of compassion, of care, of responsibility to those who are the weakest. You may remember that when he was in law school, he left for a year and went to Honduras to do volunteer work there. You know, if one of my students said they would like to do that at Columbia, I would welcome it, whether they were Catholic or not. But I think Tim Kaine's Catholicism runs very deep for him out of a sense of responsibility and public service. And what I see in Mike Pence is the way in which religion passes as a justification for thinking the world in old-fashioned, perhaps ways that never existed before, but in narrow-minded ways and often hateful ways. And it's a real contrast between the two. Now, Kaine does say that in his own personal faith he's opposed to abortion, and he's also opposed to the death penalty. But he also says that as a public official, as an elected official, his obligation is to abide by the law and the Constitution. I don't see that from Mike Pence.
That's Columbia University law professor Catherine Franke. To watch our full Expanding the Debate special from Tuesday night, visit DemocracyNow.org. It was 3.5 hours. We aired the full debate and again gave the Green Party vice presidential nominee, Ajamu Baraka, a chance to respond to every question in real time. We'd also invited William Weld of the Libertarian Party. He didn't take us up on the invitation. In that special, we also spoke to Intercept journalists Lee Fang and Zaid Jilani, attorney Chase Strangio of the ACLU's LGBT and AIDS Project, Naila Iwan, the civil and human rights lawyer at Demos, and Andrew Basevich, retired colonel and Vietnam War veteran, his latest book, America's War for the Great Middle East, Military History. Tune in Sunday for Democracy Now!'s Expanding the Debate coverage of the next Donald Trump-Hillary Clinton debate, the second of 3 presidential debates. That does it for our show today. Our website is DemocracyNow.org. And you can follow us on Facebook as well as Instagram, Twitter, and all different forms of social media. And tell your friends about Democracy Now!, people-powered media. Democracy Now! Is produced by Mike Perk, Nermeen Sheikh, Carla Wills, Laura Gottesdiener, Dina Guzder, Sam Alkoff, Robbie Karen, Hani Massoud, Sharina Nadura, and Andre Lewis, Mike DeFilippo, Miguel Noguera, and Paul Huckabee, our engineers. Special thanks and happy birthday birthday to Becca Staley. Also thanks to Miriam Barnard, Julie Crosby, Hugh Grant, David Prude, Ariel Boone, Vesta Godars, Anthony Manzo, and to our camera crew, John Randolph, Kieran Krug-Meadows, Anna Osbeck, and Matt Ely. Our website, again, is democracynow.org. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks so much for joining us. From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
Well, this is one where we can just kind of go to the tape on it. But Governor Pence said, inarguably, Vladimir Putin is a better leader than President Biden.
That is absolutely inaccurate.
And I just think a guy
I said
he's
been stronger on the world stage.
No, you said leader. And I'll just say this, Governor.
You just said better.
If you mistake leadership for dictatorship and you can't tell the difference, a country that's running its economy.
Yeah, here we go. This is the grade school thing again. Right.
If you can't tell the difference, you shouldn't be commander-in-chief.
In the only vice presidential debate of the 2016 race, Democrat Tim Kaine squared off with Republican Mike Pence at Longwood University in Virginia. We'll air highlights from our Expanding the Debate special, including Green Party vice presidential candidate Ajamu Baraka. We gave him a chance to respond live in real time during the debate to the same questions posed to Kaine and Pence.
This conversation is really surreal. What gives the U.S. the justification to believe that it has a moral right to intervene any place on this planet? Are we to believe that they are the arbiters, the supporters, the defenders of international human rights? Well, any rational person who can see and can think clearly and can see that cannot be the case.
We'll also speak with historian Andrew Bacevich, author of the new book, America's War for the Greater Middle East, A Military History. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. At least 11 people are feared to be dead in the Caribbean after the massive Category 4 Hurricane Matthew slammed into Haiti and the Dominican Republic Tuesday with winds up to 145 miles an hour and torrential downpours. It's the strongest storm to hit the Caribbean in nearly a decade. In Haiti, Hurricane Matthews killed at least 4 people, displaced thousands more across the country, still recovering from the devastating 2010 Haitian earthquake. The storm also knocked out most communications across Haiti and flooded a major bridge connecting southern Haiti to the rest of the country. The United Nations has warned the hurricane poses the greatest humanitarian threat to Haiti since the earthquake 6 years ago. The hurricane has also hit the Bahamas and Cuba, where the U.S. military evacuated 700 employees and some family pets from the naval base at Guantanamo Bay, although it did not evacuate the 61 prisoners held there. The storm is now hurtling toward the U.S. coast. In anticipation, multiple governors have declared states of emergency, and South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley has ordered the evacuation of coastal regions inhabited by more than 1 million people. Meanwhile, in South Korea, Typhoon Chaba has killed at least 5 people after it made landfall Wednesday, flooding out South Korea's main port and major cities. The typhoon is now hurtling toward Japan. Scientists have linked the increasing intensity of hurricanes and typhoons to climate change. In news from the campaign trail, Vice presidential candidates Virginia Senator Tim Kaine and Indiana Governor Mike Pence squared off Tuesday night in the only vice presidential debate. It was held at Longwood University in Farmville, Virginia, moderated by Elaine Quijano of CBS News. The debate was tense, with Kaine frequently attacking Pence over the proposals and character of his running mate, Donald Trump.
I'll just say this. We trust Hillary Clinton, my wife and I, and we trust her with the most important thing in our life. We have a son deployed overseas in the Marine Corps right now. We trust Hillary Clinton as president and commander-in-chief, but the thought of Donald Trump as commander-in-chief scares us to death.
Indiana Governor Pence, meanwhile, defended Donald Trump's refusal to release his tax returns amidst new revelations that suggest Trump might well have avoided paying taxes for up to 18 years. This clip begins with Senator Kaine.
But why won't he release his tax return?
Well, we're answering the question about the business thing.
I do want to come back on this.
His tax returns that showed he went through a very difficult time. But he used the tax code just the way it's supposed to be used, and he did it brilliantly.
How do you know that? You haven't seen his tax return.
Third-party vice presidential nominees were excluded from the debate. But on Tuesday night, Democracy Now! Expanded the debate in real time after every question answered by the major party vice presidential candidates Mike Pence and Tim Kaine. We paused to get response from Green Party vice presidential nominee Ajamu Baraka. We'll continue to run parts of this expanded debate after headlines. In more campaign news, a fight broke out at a Donald Trump campaign rally in Prescott, Arizona, between a Trump supporter and protester Tuesday. There have been episodes of violence at Trump rallies throughout the campaign, which many have linked to Trump's rhetoric. In March, 3 anti-Trump protesters sued Donald Trump, arguing he incited a riot at a rally in Louisville, Kentucky, causing them to be attacked by his supporters after he repeatedly called on the crowd to, quote, get them out. Get them out. In Indiana, state police have raided Indiana's largest voter registration office. The Intercept reports nearly a dozen police officers searched the Indianapolis offices of the Indiana Voter Registration Project, seizing multiple computers and workers' personal cell phones. The police say the search is related to an ongoing investigation into possible voter registration fraud. But organizers say the operation was an attack on voter registration efforts. Former employees of the email giant Yahoo say Yahoo secretly scanned the contents of hundreds of millions of email accounts and turned the information over to the NSA or FBI. In order to do so, Yahoo secretly built a special software program specifically designed to search every single user's emails for keywords provided by the U.S. government. If true, the practice represents the first known time a giant email company searched all arriving emails in real time at the behest of the U.S. government's domestic surveillance programs. And in Poland, as many as 6 million women poured into the streets for a nationwide protest Monday, opposing proposals to completely ban abortions across Poland. Already by law, Polish women are only allowed to get an abortion if the child is the result of rape or incest, or if their lives are in danger as a result of the pregnancy. But the new proposed laws would make all abortions illegal and punishable by up to 5 years in prison for the mother. Doctors could also be jailed for providing abortions. The Catholic Church in Poland is supporting the proposed ban. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, DemocracyNow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Vice presidential candidates Republican Mike Pence and Democrat Tim Kaine faced off in Longwood University in Farmville, Virginia, Tuesday night, in their first and only debate before next month's election. Pence is the governor of Indiana and a former congressman. Tim Kaine is the junior senator from Virginia and Virginia's former governor, before that the mayor of Richmond. Third-party vice presidential candidates, including Libertarian William Weld and the Green Party's Ajamu Baraka, were excluded from the debate stage under stringent rules set by the Commission on Presidential Debates, which is controlled by the Democratic and Republican parties. Well, on Tuesday night, Democracy Now! Aired a special expanding the debate broadcast, where we gave major third-party candidates a chance to respond to the same questions in real time, live, as the major candidates. The Green Party's Ajamu Baraka joined us live from Richmond, Virginia. Libertarian vice presidential candidate William Weld did not respond to our offer. Ajamu Baraka is a longtime human rights activist and the founding executive director of the U.S. Human Rights Network and coordinator of the U.S.-based Black Left Unity Network's Committee on International Affairs. Today, we air highlights from our Expanding the Debate special. We begin with moderator Elaine Quijano of CBS News.
All right, I want to turn to our next segment now, immigration. Your running mates have both said that undocumented immigrants who have committed violent crimes should be deported. What would you tell the millions of undocumented immigrants who have not committed violent crimes? Governor Pence.
Donald Trump's laid out a plan to end illegal immigration once and for all in this country. We've been talking it to death for 20 years. Hillary Clinton and Tim Kaine want to continue the policies of open borders, amnesty, catch and release, sanctuary cities, all the things that are driving wages down in this country, Senator. And also, too often, with criminal aliens in the country, it's bringing heartbreak. But Donald Trump has a plan that he laid out in Arizona that will deal systematically with illegal immigration, beginning with border security, internal enforcement. It's probably why, for the first time in the history of Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, their union actually endorsed Donald Trump as the next president of the United States, because they know they need help to enforce the laws of this country. And Donald Trump has laid out a priority to remove criminal aliens, remove people that have overstayed their visas. And once we have accomplished all of that, which will strengthen our economy, strengthen the rule of law in the country, and make our communities safer once the criminal aliens are out, then we'll deal with those that remain. But I have to tell you, I was listening to the avalanche of insults coming out of Senator Kaine a minute ago.
These were Donald.
He says,
hold on a second.
It's my
Governor.
time, Senator.
It is, in fact,
right. I apologize. This is your 2 minutes.
Thanks. I forgive you. He says ours is an insult-driven campaign. Did you all just hear that? Ours is an insult-driven campaign. I mean, to be honest with you, if Donald Trump had said all the things that you said he said in the way you said he said them, he still wouldn't have a fraction of the insults that Hillary Clinton leveled when she said that half of our supporters were a basket of deplorables. She said they were irredeemable. They were not America. I mean, it's extraordinary. And then she laid one after another ism on millions of Americans who believe that we can have a stronger America at home and abroad, who believe we can get this economy moving again, who believe that we can end illegal immigration once and for all. So, Senator, this insult-driven campaign, I mean, that's small potatoes compared to Hillary Clinton calling half of Donald Trump's supporters a basket of deplorables.
Hillary Clinton said something on the campaign trail, and the very next day she said, you know what, I shouldn't have said that.
She said she shouldn't have said half.
Governor, this is Senator Kaine's 2 minutes, please.
Yeah, that's right. So now we're even.
Yeah.
Look for Donald Trump apologizing to John McCain for saying he wasn't a hero. Did Donald Trump apologize for calling women slobs, pigs, dogs, disgusting?
She apologized for saying
Governor, it is his 2 minutes, please.
Did Donald Trump apologize for taking after somebody in a Twitter war and making fun of her weight? Did he apologize for saying African Americans are living in hell? Did he apologize for saying President Obama was not even a citizen of the United States? You will look in vain to see Donald Trump ever taking responsibility for anybody and apologizing. Immigration. There's 2 plans on the table. Hillary and I believe in comprehensive immigration reform. Donald Trump believes in deportation nation. You got to pick your choice. Hillary and I want a bipartisan reform that will put keeping families together as the top goal. Second, that will help focus enforcement efforts on those who are violent. Third, that will do more border control. And fourth, that will provide a path to citizenship for those who work hard, pay taxes, play by the rules, and take criminal background record checks. That's our proposal. Donald Trump proposes to deport 16 million people, 11 million who are here without documents, and both Donald Trump and Mike Pence want to get rid of birthright citizenship. So if you're born here, but your parents don't have documents, they want to eliminate that. That's another 4.5 million people. These guys, and Donald Trump has said it, deportation force. They want to go house to house, school to school, business to business, and kick out 16 million people. And I cannot believe that Governor Pence would sit here and defend his running mate's claim that we should create a deportation force so that they'll all be gone.
Senator, we have a deportation force. It's called Immigrations and Customs Enforcement. And the Union for Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, for the first time in their history, endorsed Donald Trump to be the next president of the United States.
So you like the 16 million deportation plan?
Senator, that's nonsense. Look, what you just heard is they have a plan for open borders, amnesty.
Our plan is like Ronald Reagan's plan from 1986.
They call it comprehensive immigration reform on Capitol Hill. We all know the routine. It's amnesty. And you heard one of the last things he mentioned was border security. That's how Washington always plays it.
No,
so
I always say we're going to do this for border security 3 years ago, and Governor Pence was against it.
Governor, Mr.
Ronald
Trump
Reagan
has
said a nation without borders is not a nation. Donald Trump is committed to restoring the borders of this nation.
Green Party Vice Presidential nominee Ajamu Baraka, the Green Party's plan for immigration and your response to the Democratic and Republican candidates.
Dr. Stein has laid out our plan, which is basically we support comprehensive immigration reform, but we also understand that we've got to address the issues that drive people to this country. And those issues are related to the relationship between the U.S. and these various countries in various parts of the world, in particular in Central and South America. If we have fair trade, if we have a situation where countries are allowed to develop along their own lines, where they can develop their economy, then we won't have the push that we see that is occurring that's compelling people to have to come to or go to another country in order to survive. We see the consequence of NAFTA is devastating effects on the countryside in Mexico. And now we see the same kind of agreement being at the point of being approved with the Trans-Pacific Partnership. So these kinds of trade issues, these kinds of economic issues are the driving force for immigration. We think that both parties can be criticized for their immigration or non-immigration policies. It is really sort of rich that the Democrats would talk about a deportation, where under the Obama administration we've had record deportations, and the consequence has been a reign of terror in various immigrant communities. The Obama administration has refused to respect the provisions of the covenant, the Convention on Migrant Rights, that would give undocumented folks the ability to live a life out of the shadows, to have access to education and to health care. So both parties have played games with this immigration issue. And we believe that the only way we're going to be able to address this issue is, again, building a powerful movement that will force the politicians to have something that is really rooted in the real needs of people, to allow them to be legalized and allow them to organize themselves and allow them to be fully human. And that means we've got to struggle to achieve that.
Let's go back to moderator Elaine Quijano of CBS News questioning Indiana Governor Mike Pence.
Your fellow Republican, Governor Pence, Senator Tim Scott, who is African-American, recently spoke on the Senate floor. He said he was stopped 7 times by law enforcement in 1 year.
A U.S.
He
Senator.
said, I have felt the anger, the frustration, the sadness, and the humiliation that comes with feeling like you're being targeted for nothing more than being just yourself. What would you say to Senator Scott about his experiences?
Well, I have the deepest respect for Senator Scott, and he's a close friend. And what I would say is that we need to adopt criminal justice reform nationally. I signed criminal justice reform in the state of Indiana, Senator, and we're very proud of it. I worked when I was in Congress on the Second Chance Act. We have got to do a better job recognizing and correcting the errors in the system that do reflect an institutional bias in criminal justice. But what Donald Trump and I are saying is, let's not have the reflex of assuming the worst of men and women in law enforcement. We truly do believe that law enforcement is not a force for racism or division in our country.
Scott, Governor?
Law enforcement in this country is a force for good. They truly are people that put their lives on the line every single day. But I would suggest to you, what we need to do is assert a stronger leadership at the national level to support law enforcement. You just heard Senator Kaine reject a stop and frisk. Well, I would suggest to you that the families that live in our inner cities that are besieged by crime.
Elaine, let me
Scott. What would you tell Senator Scott?
If I could jump, but I've heard Senator Scott make that eloquent plea, and look, Criminal justice is about respecting the law and being respected by the law. So there is a fundamental respect issue here. And I just want to talk about the tone that's set from the top. Donald Trump during this campaign has called Mexicans rapists and criminals. He's called women slobs, pigs, dogs, disgusting. I don't like saying that in front of my wife and my mother. He attacked an Indiana-born federal judge and said he was unqualified to hear a federal lawsuit because his parents were Mexican. He went after John McCain, a POW, and said he wasn't a hero because he'd been captured. He said African Americans are living in hell, and he perpetrated this outrageous and bigoted lie that President Obama is not a U.S. citizen. If you want to have a society where people are respected and respect laws, you can't have somebody at the top who demeans every group that he talks about. And I cannot believe that Governor Pence will defend the insult-driven campaign that Donald Trump has run.
Green Party Vice Presidential nominee Ajamu Baraka, what would you respond to South Carolina Senator Tim Scott, African-American, who spoke about being stopped by police numerous times?
That he represents a lived reality in this country, that it is what we spoke about a moment ago, that in this country, if you are an African-American, and in particular African-American male, but now also a African-American woman, you are subjected to this kind of harassment, this kind of dehumanization. It is part of what we see with the increased aggressive policing in our communities. And why has that occurred? Well, one reason we believe is because what we have now is an aggression that is a reflection of the fact that our communities are seen as a surplus population, a surplus community. That right now, because black labor is no longer needed in this new economy, we find that we have become a social problem. And we see the consequence of that with mass incarceration, with this aggressive policing, with the war being waged against our communities and against Latinos and against Native people. So, that is the reality that we are facing, and it's a reality that we've got to resist. It is a systematic violation of our fundamental human rights, and every people on this planet have a right to resist any encroachment, any violation of their human rights, and that is something that we are prepared to support. We stand in solidarity with people who are in resistance to the systematic oppression, and as part of what we are doing with this campaign in terms of connecting up with that resistance movement and hoping that we can expand that movement to a powerful force here in this country.
Green Party Vice Presidential nominee Ajamu Baraka responding in real time during the debate last night in our Expanding the Debate special. We'll continue with this special in a moment.
But if you try sometimes, well, you might find you get what you need. And I went down to the demonstration to get my fair share of abuse, singing words gonna vent frustration. If we don't, we're gonna blow a 50-amp fuse. Sing it to me. You can't always get what you want. You can't always get what you want. You can't always get what you want. But if you try sometimes, well, you just might find you get what you need.
You can't always get what you want. The Rolling Stones here on Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman as we return to our Expanding the Debate special. On Tuesday night, vice presidential candidates Republican Governor Mike Pence and Democratic Senator Tim Kaine faced off at Longwood University in Farmville, Virginia, in their first and only debate before next same questions put to the major candidates. The Green Party's Ajamu Baraka joined us live from Richmond, Virginia. Today, we're airing highlights of our special. This is moderator Elaine Quijano of CBS News.
Gentlemen, Russia. Russian President Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine, annexed Crimea, and has provided crucial military support to the Assad regime. What steps, if any, would your administration take to counter these actions? Senator Kaine.
You got to be tough on Russia. So let's start with not praising Vladimir Putin as a great leader. Donald Trump and Mike Pence have said he's a great leader. And Donald Trump has business dealings with Russia that he refuses to disclose. Hillary Clinton has gone toe-to-toe with Russia. She went toe-to-toe with Russia as Secretary of State to do the New START agreement to reduce Russia's nuclear stockpile. She's had the experience doing it. She went toe-to-toe with Russia and lodged protests when they went into Georgia. And we've done the same thing about Ukraine, but more than lodging protests, we've put punishing economic sanctions on Russia that we need to continue. Donald Trump, on the other hand, didn't know that Russia had invaded the Crimea.
Oh, that's nonsense.
He was on a TV show a couple months back, and he said, I'll guarantee you this, Russia's not going into the Ukraine. And he had to be reminded that they had gone into the Crimea 2 years before. Hillary Clinton has gone toe-to-toe with Russia to work out a deal on New START. She got them engaged in a meaningful way to cap Iran's nuclear weapons program, and yet she stood up to them on issues such as Syria and their invasion of Georgia. You've got to have the ability to do that, and Hillary does. On the other hand, in Donald Trump, you have somebody who praises Vladimir Putin all the time. America should really wonder about a President Trump who had a campaign manager with ties to Putin, pro-Putin elements in the Ukraine, who had to be fired for that reason. They should wonder, when Donald Trump is sitting down with Vladimir Putin, is it going to be America's bottom line, or is it going to be Donald Trump's bottom line that he's going to be worried about with all of his business dealings? Now, this could be solved if Donald Trump would be willing to release his tax returns, as he told the American public that he would do. And I know he's laughing at this, but every president...
What's it got to do with Russia?
Every president since Richard Nixon has done it, and Donald Trump has said, I'm doing business with Russia. The only way the American public will see whether he has a conflict of interest...
No, he hasn't said that.
Senator, your time is up. Governor.
Well, thanks. Just trying to keep up with the insult-driven campaign on the other side of the table.
You know, I'm just saying facts about your running mate.
Yeah. Well,
and I know you can't defend him.
Senator, please,
I'm happy to defend him, Senator. Don't put words in my mouth that I'm not defending him.
You're not.
I'm happy to defend him. Most of what you said is completely false, and the American people know that.
I'll run through the list of things where you didn't defend.
Senator, please, this is Governor Pence's 2 minutes.
Look, this is the alternative universe of Washington, D.C. versus reality. Hillary Clinton said her #1 priority was a reset with Russia. That reset resulted in the invasion of Ukraine. After they'd infiltrated with what are called little green men, Russian soldiers that were dressing up like Ukrainian dissidents. And then they moved all the way into Crimea, took over the Crimean Peninsula. And Donald Trump knew that happened. He basically was saying it's not going to happen again. The truth of the matter is that what you have in the rise of aggressive Russia, which has had increased its influence in Iran, that now because of this deal is on a pathway in the future to obtain a nuclear. The leading state sponsor of terror in the world in Iran now has a closer working relationship with Russia because of Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama's foreign policy. And $150 billion and sanctions all being lifted. And then, of course, Syria. I mean, it really is extraordinary. Syria is imploding. You just asked a very thoughtful question about the disaster in Aleppo. ISIS is headquartered in Raqqa. ISIS from Raqqa has overrun vast areas that at great sacrifice the American soldier won in Operation Iraqi Freedom. And yet, Senator Kaine still sits here, loyal soldier. I get all that. It's saying that the foreign policy of Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama somehow made the world more secure. I mean, it really is astonishing that on the day that Iran released 4 American hostages, we delivered $400 million in cash as a ransom payment for Americans held by the radical mullahs in Tehran.
Green Party Vice Presidential nominee Ajamu Baraka.
You know, this conversation is really surreal. What gives the U.S. the justification to believe that it has a moral right to intervene any place on this planet? Are we to believe that they are the arbiters, the supporters, the defenders of international human rights? Well, any rational person who can see and can think clearly can see that cannot be the case. That we talk about the aggression on the part of the Russians, but let's look at what's happened over the last 15 years with U.S. policies. They have gone into Iraq and destroyed that country. They have gone into Afghanistan. They have subverted Venezuela. They have gone into Libya and destroyed that country. They have been involved in aggression across the planet. Obama every Tuesday decides who's going to live and die in his drone program. They allow for the Saudis to go into Yemen and to create a humanitarian crisis there that no one talks about. So this notion of the U.S. having some kind of humanitarian justification to flaunt international law, to intervene where it chooses, to determine what governments are legitimate or not, to claim to be in a position to criticize the Russians, to me is surreal. We have to have a more critical approach to an understanding of U.S. policy. We cannot allow ourselves to be so easily manipulated by the administrations and by the corporate press that clearly, even in the framing of these questions, have assumed that we have this enemy in the Russians and that the only solution, the only way we deal with these competitors, that's what we're talking about, capitalist competitors, is through military means. We've got to resist that and reject those kinds of policies. And that's what we intend to do with this campaign.
Let's go back to debate moderator Elaine Quijano.
Gentlemen, I'd like to shift now to the threat of terrorism. Do you think the world today is a safer or more dangerous place than it was 8 years ago? Has the terrorist threat increased or decreased? Senator Kaine.
The terrorist threat has decreased in some ways because bin Laden is dead. The terrorist threat has decreased in some ways because an Iranian nuclear weapons program has been stopped. The terrorist threat to United States troops has been decreased in some ways because there's not 175,000 in a dangerous part of the world. There's only 15,000, but there are other parts of the world that are challenging. Let me tell you this. To beat terrorism, there's only one candidate who can do it, and it's Hillary Clinton. Remember, Hillary Clinton was the senator from New York on 9/11. She was there at the World Trade Center when they were still searching for victims and survivors. That seared onto her the need to beat terrorism. And she's got a plan to do it. She was part of the national security team that wiped out bin Laden. Here's her plan to defeat ISIL. First, we got to keep taking out their leaders on the battlefield. She was part of the team that got bin Laden, and she'll lead the team that will get Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the head of ISIS. Second, we got to disrupt financing networks. Third, disrupt their ability to recruit on the internet in their safe havens. But fourth, we also have to work with allies to share and surge intelligence. That's the Hillary Clinton plan. She's got the experience to do it. Donald Trump. Donald Trump can't start a Twitter war with Miss Universe without shooting himself in the foot. Donald Trump doesn't have a plan. He said, I have a secret plan. And then he said, I know more than all the generals about ISIL. And then he said, I'm going to call the generals to help me figure out a plan. And finally, he said, I'm going to fire all the generals. He doesn't have a plan. But he does have dangerous ideas. Here's four. He trash talks the military. The military is a disaster. John McCain's no hero. The generals need all to be fired, and I know more than them. He wants to tear up alliances. NATO is obsolete and will only work together with Israel if they pay big league. Third, he loves dictators. He's got kind of a personal Mount Rushmore. Vladimir Putin, Kim Jong-un, Muammar Gaddafi, and Saddam Hussein. And last and most dangerously, Donald Trump believes that the world will be safer if more nations have nuclear weapons. He said Saudi Arabia should get them, Japan should get them, Korea should get them. And when he was confronted with this and told, wait a minute, terrorists could get those, proliferation could lead to nuclear war, here's what Donald Trump said, and I quote, go ahead, folks, enjoy yourselves. I'd love to hear Governor Pence tell me what's so enjoyable or comical about nuclear war.
Governor Pence.
Did you work on that one a long time? Because that had a lot of really creative lines in it.
Well, I'm going to see if you can defend any of it.
Look, I can defend. I can make it very clear to the American people After traveling millions of miles as our Secretary of State, after being the architect of the foreign policy of this administration, America is less safe today than it was the day that Barack Obama became president of the United States. It's absolutely inarguable. We've weakened America's place in the world. It's been a combination of factors, but mostly it's been a lack of leadership. I mean, I will give you, and I was in Washington, D.C. on 9/11. I saw the clouds of smoke rise from the Pentagon.
I was in Virginia, where the Pentagon's
I know you were. We all lived through that day as a nation. It was heartbreaking. And I want to give this president credit for bringing Osama bin Laden to justice. But the truth is, Osama bin Laden led al-Qaeda. Our primary threat today is ISIS. And because Hillary Clinton failed to renegotiate a status of forces agreement that would have allowed some American combat troops to remain in Iraq and secure the hard-fought gains the American soldier had won by 2009, ISIS was able to be literally conjured up out of the desert, and it's overrun vast areas that the American soldier had won in Operation Iraqi Freedom. My heart breaks for the likes of Lance Corporal Scott Zabowski. He fell in Fallujah in 2005. He fought hard through some of the most difficult days in Operation Iraqi Freedom, and he paid the ultimate sacrifice to defend our freedom and secure that nation. And that nation was secured in 2009. But because Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama failed to provide a status of forces agreement and leave sufficient troops in there, we are back at war. The president just ordered more troops on the ground. We are back at war in Iraq. And Scott Zabowski, whose mom would always come to Memorial Day events in Newcastle, Indiana to see me, and I'd always give her a hug and tell her we're never going to forget our son, and we never will. Scott Zabowski and the sacrifices the American soldier made were squandered in Iraq because this administration created a vacuum in which ISIS was able to grow. And a reference to the Iranian deal that Hillary Clinton initiated, $150 billion
stopping a
to the
nuclear
radical
weapons
mullahs
program
in
without
Iran.
firing a shot?
You didn't stop the nuclear weapons
Yes, we
program.
did.
You
Even the Israeli military says it stopped.
guaranteed that Iran will someday become a nuclear power because there's no limitations once the period of time of the treaty comes off.
John Mubarak, Green Party vice presidential nominee. The question, do you think that this country is safer or is it more dangerous than it was 8 years ago?
This country and the world is more dangerous as a consequence of the rampage that the U.S. has been involved in the so-called Middle East. I think Governor Pence and Tim Kaine, I think they forgot that the real genesis of this situation really has to be laid at the foot of the invasion of Iraq, an invasion that Hillary Clinton supported, and an invasion that is where we see the expansion of the forces of the jihadists in that part of the world. So it's been the policies of both administrations. Under the Bush administration, there was a conscious decision to utilize jihadist forces to advance U.S. policies. The award-winning journalist Seymour Hersh clearly documented that. And that policy was continued under the Obama administration. So the policies of using these jihadists to advance their interests in places like Syria, we see the blowback happening across the world. The policies of going into Libya and destroying that state. You know, one of the things that did not come out in the hearings around Benghazi was what was happening at that annex. And I think the story is very clear. What they were involved in at the annex was a gun-running program to transfer the weapons from Libya, after they had destroyed that country, to Syria. So we see that it's been the militarism, it's been the policies of the Bush and the Obama administration that has created the destabilization not only in the Middle East, but also we are experiencing the blowback of the enhancement, the military enhancement of these jihadist forces. So, you know, any simple explanation that can be put on at the feet of either one of these parties is something that we have to look at very critically. This is part of a collective process, a bipartisan process to advance U.S. interests by using these unsavory forces and working through their vassal states like the Saudis, who even Joe Biden said they can't stop the Saudis from providing finance to these various Wahhabist groups. So this is a complex and a nasty game that is being played by the elites.
Green Party Vice Presidential candidate John Mubaraka is part of our Expanding the Debate special, when we gave him a chance to respond to the same questions in real time posed to Democrat Tim Kaine and Republican Mike Pence in the first and only vice presidential debate of this election season. Watch the full debate at DemocracyNow.org. When we come back, we get response. Stay with us.
Russian roulette in my head, 17 black, or 29 red. How far from the gutter, how far from the pew, I will always remember.
Tom Waits, good man is hard to find. This is Democracy Now!, DemocracyNow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Prior to last night's debate, Democracy Now's Nermeen Sheikh and I hosted a roundtable with a number of guests, including Columbia University law professor Catherine Franke, who chairs the board of the Center for Constitutional Rights, and historian Andrew Bacevich, a retired colonel and Vietnam War vet, his latest book, America's War for the Middle East. Nermeen began by asking Professor Bacevich about the recent presidential town hall hosted by NBC's Matt Lauer on the Hudson here in New York.
You last month attended the Commander-in-Chief Forum, which took place on the USS Intrepid aircraft carrier. Could you tell us what happened at that forum and what that tells you about the way in which foreign policy and national security issues are being talked about in this campaign season?
Well, it was a great missed opportunity because the moderated interviews, first with Hillary Clinton and then with Donald Trump, basically were a waste of time. The candidates were never asked the sorts of questions that Americans need to hear about with regard to national security. So, for example, there was no discussion of President Obama's planned trillion-dollar modernization of our nuclear arsenal, whether or not that's a good idea, a bad idea, necessary and inflammatory. There was no discussion about what we might learn from our post-9/11 wars in the greater Middle East, particularly Iraq and Afghanistan, but not limited to those two. Those wars have obviously been unsuccessful. What should we learn from them, and how would those lessons apply to either a Trump administration or a Clinton administration going forward? So, again, I think it was really a terrible missed opportunity.
One thing that wasn't commented on, this was an NBC forum, Matt Lauer was the moderator, was even that this discussion about foreign policy took place on a warship, you know, in the New York harbor. I mean, even for the military and veterans, isn't the military the last resort, really the failure of civilization not to be able to resolve its problems, but to hold it on the Intrepid? Your thoughts on this, Professor Bacevich?
Well, you're making a very good point. And of course, our politicians do ritually talk about the military being a last resort, but any examination of U.S. policy, not simply since the end of the Cold War, since 9/11, but I think more broadly since the end of the Cold War, would suggest otherwise, that the military has become the preferred option as far as American statecraft is concerned. Why? Because of expectations in Washington, shared by both parties, shared by both of these two presidential candidates, that somehow or other military power offers
the most effective way to achieve our purposes. And this notion persists despite the accumulation of evidence that suggests otherwise. I mean, the evidence suggests that the American reliance on American military power has been enormously costly, both in terms of lives lost, lives shattered, dollars wasted, with very little to show in terms of positive results. But I think it's really tragic and a judgment on our politics that these accumulating military failures simply don't get the kind of scrutiny that they deserve, even here in the middle of a presidential election.
Well, Professor Bacevich, you mentioned earlier that there was no discussion of nuclear issues at that forum on the USS Intrepid, but you've also written a piece on the first presidential debate and the failure of both Trump and Clinton to respond to a very specific question that the moderator, Lester Holt, addressed to them about the long-standing U.S. policy on first use. So can you say exactly what happened when that question was posed last week?
Yeah, sure. So this is Lester Holt, who moderated in the first direct debate between the two candidates, and he asked a question that basically said the following: President Obama has been considering a change to the U.S. policy on nuclear first use. Do you agree with the current policy? And this gets into a little bit of nuclear theology, because first use has a very specific meaning in that context. And what it means is that the United States, for decades now, has adhered to a policy that basically says we will not restrict our use of nuclear weapons to responding to a nuclear weapons attack. That restriction is called no first use. They will only use nuclear weapons in response to nuclear weapons attack. So Obama supposedly thought about changing this policy, decided not to. Lester Holt wanted to know what the two candidates thought. He asked Trump first, and Trump's meandering answer basically suggested that Trump, had no idea about what the phrase first use means. That's troubling. When the question then was tossed to Secretary Clinton, she basically changed the subject. She avoided any discussion of U.S. nuclear policy and U.S. nuclear strategy. And again, to me, their failure to address Lester Holt's question in a serious way robbed the American people of an opportunity to reflect on one of these core issues related to U.S. nuclear strategy.
Well, can you also outline, you've explicitly stated some of your concerns about Trump's foreign policy positions, to the extent that you can identify any consistency on them, in particular on Iraq and his comments about how the U.S. should have taken the oil, etc., and also Clinton's foreign policy, her tenure as Secretary of State, her position on Libya, her subsequent defense of her position on Libya, and what that might indicate about the position she's likely to take if she becomes president on Syria, on ISIS, etc.?
Well, I think, frankly, it's impossible for us to gauge what a Trump foreign policy would look like. He is, by and large, uninformed. He's strategically illiterate. He knows as much about national security policy as I know about running a business, and what I know about running a business is next to nothing. And the problem, I think, one of the problems with the media coverage of the campaign, the way the mainstream media has covered it, is that the appalling prospect of a Trump presidency has caused the campaign to be about Trump. The imperative of revealing simply how ill-prepared he is for the office, of revealing how uncouth he is, his sketchy relationship with truth, and therefore the discussion of the campaign hasn't really admitted any debate, serious debate, over over the national security issues that we really do confront. As for Secretary Clinton, it seems to me she is very much a mainstream, hawkish, liberal internationalist. The most significant aspect of her tenure as Secretary of State, in my judgment, is certainly not the Benghazi episode, but was her support for the intervention in Libya to overthrow Muammar Gaddafi, which succeeded in doing that and basically turned Libya into a failed state that was then became subject to a new jihadist franchise. Her record very much deserves close examination. My own sense is that if she becomes president, and I expect that she will become president, is that we will find very little change in the trajectory of U.S. policy, in the excessive militarization of U.S. policy. I see very little indication that she has a sort of creative intellect that will lead her to ask serious questions about that trajectory, and we're going to get more of the same, and more of the same is not good enough.
Well, very quickly before we wrap, Professor Bacevich, could you just outline some of the questions? You were critical of the mainstream media, the questions that you think the candidates should have been asked on foreign policy. You mentioned a couple on nuclear issues. What about the others?
Well, I think one question has to do with what is the authorization, what is the authority under which the president continues to conduct our wars in the greater Middle East, specifically the new war in Iraq against ISIS and U.S. involvement in the civil war in Syria. Nominally, the authorization is the document that was passed by the Congress in the immediate wake of 9/11. That document said that the president was authorized to go after parties that perpetrated 9/11. Well, obviously, the Assad regime didn't perpetrate 9/11. ISIS didn't perpetrate 9/11. It didn't exist at the time. So I think we really ought to have a serious discussion over who says that we should be at war, and why doesn't the Congress exercise any serious voice in that regard, as the Constitution of the United States calls for? That would be one very important question, I think, that deserves to be at the forefront of this discussion.
The issue of Syria, I wanted to bring Catherine Franke into this discussion, and this goes to the vice presidential candidates, particularly to what's happening in Indiana. And then I wanted to get Professor Bacevich's response to this. Syrian refugees and what's taking place now, the effects of what's taking place, the horror, the catastrophe of Syria today, and what the U.S. is doing about it.
Well, in particular, what Mike Pence has done about it is, as governor of the state of Indiana, he has issued a ruling saying that he will not allow any Syrians to be placed in the state of Indiana, with federal money, I would say. So the states receive substantial grants from the federal government to aid in the resettlement of refugees, including Syrians. And the president has said that we will bring in a great number of Syrians. This policy was challenged by a resettlement group in Indiana that works with, among other people, Syrians. And a local judge, a federal court judge, in Indiana enjoined the policy, saying that this was unfair and discriminatory. And just yesterday, a 3-judge panel of the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals, not a liberal circuit by any means, and all 3 of those judges very conservative, Judge Posner, Judge Easterbrook, and Dianne Sykes, who is, by the way, on Donald Trump's list of possible Supreme Court nominees, upheld the lower court's injunction and said that this is absolutely discriminatory to say that we will not admit into our state people from one national origin or from one country on the absolutely fabricated claim that they would be terrorists. And one of the things that, if I can read for a second what Judge Posner said, which was just so spot on, is that the argument made by Mike Pence's lawyers is the equivalent of saying that he wants to forbid black people to settle in Indiana, not because they're black, but because he's afraid of them. And since race is therefore not his motive, he's not discriminating. That's essentially what Mike Pence is saying. I don't hate Syrians. I'm just afraid of them. So a 3-judge panel has overturned that ruling, and Syrians can now be settled in Indiana.
At the same time, Texas officially withdrew from the refugee resettlement program. Isn't that right, Governor Abbott? Well,
they can withdraw altogether, and the state cannot facilitate the resettlement of people, but the local resettlement groups, the private groups that do this, can apply for federal money and basically go around the states that are obstructing the settlement. But Indiana took the money from the federal government and then said, but we're afraid and are prepared to discriminate against Syrians.
I wanted to go back before we say goodbye to Professor Bacevich to the comments of Donald Trump about veterans struggling with PTSD. He was asked about the issue during an event with veterans in Herndon, Virginia, and this is just getting some attention now.
When you become president, will you support and fund a more holistic approach to solve the problems and issues of veteran suicide, PTSD, TBI, and other related military mental and behavioral health issues? And will you take steps to restore the historic role of our chaplains and the importance of spiritual fitness and spiritual resiliency programs?
Yes, I would. Look, we need that so badly. And when you talk about the mental health problems, when people come back from war and combat and they see things that maybe a lot of the folks in this room have seen many times over, and you're strong and you can handle it, but a lot of people can't handle it.
Andrew Bacevich, your response to Donald Trump.
Well, I mean, he never misses a chance to shoot himself in the foot. And once again, clearly he's rendering a judgment about a subject that he really knows nothing about. I am not an expert in combat fatigue and PTSD, but my general understanding is that each of us as individuals has a certain capacity to absorb stress, and once as individuals that capacity is expended, is used up, that we are as individuals susceptible then to PTSD-like symptoms. But this is not a matter of a judgment of character, of strength, or weakness. So he was totally out of line. You know, it's certainly not the first time, and I'm sure it won't be the last time that he says something that is so remarkably stupid.
And on the issue of refugees, we see right now in France they're trying to dismantle what's called the jungle, where thousands of refugees from throughout the Middle East come to try to make their way into Britain. Democracy Now! Was there just in December, and the desperation of people from Afghanistan, from Somalia, from Iraq, from Syria, a map of the U.S. bombing targets. It is just astounding to see this massive crisis of refugees that we haven't seen since World War II. What is our responsibility, and what do you want to hear the candidates, both tonight with both Pence and Kaine, and also, of course, the presidential candidates, Clinton and Trump?
Well, I mean, I would certainly never defend Governor Pence's policy, which I would view as utterly reprehensible. I'm not sure that I would agree that the Obama administration has covered itself with glory here. If I'm not mistaken, the president had promised to admit 10,000 Syrian refugees, and we just now reached that goal. He promises to admit more, but 10,000 is a drop in the bucket. To the extent that we have a moral responsibility, and I believe we do, because of the contribution we have made to creating the mess that is the Middle East today, then it seems to me that the example of Angela Merkel is one that we should reflect upon. Germany has admitted 1 million refugees. A smaller country with a smaller population has admitted a vastly larger number of refugees. Maybe 1 million isn't the right number, but the current administration and we collectively, the American people, could do far, far more than we have done up to this point.
Historian Andrew Bacevich. His son, Andrew Bacevich, Jr., was an Army officer who died in Iraq in 2007. We also spoke to Columbia University law professor Catherine Franke. She's chair of the board of the Center for Constitutional Rights. To watch our full Expanding the Debate special, go to DemocracyNow.org. Special thanks to Mike Burke, to Sam Alcoff, to Trina Nadura, and Andre Lewis. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks for joining us.